TAM TUK by George Adams. Copyright 2007 and 2019 by George Adams. He is a relatively poor man, or he would not be a detective at all. He is a common man, or he could not go among common people. He has a sense of character, or he would not know his job. He will take no man's money dishonestly, and no man's insolence without due and dispassionate revenge. He is a lonely man, and his pride is that you will treat him as a proud man, or be very sorry you ever saw him. He talks as the man of his age talks, that is, with rude wit, a lively sense of the grotesque, a disgust for sham, and a contempt for pettiness. Raymond Chandler, The Simple Art of Murder. TAM TUK, Chapter 1. It had been a slack morning at the office, another of those desultory periods when husbands, for some reason, were no longer running across the border to discover second or third wives, when schoolgirls were actually going to school, rather than providing complete personal services in karaoke bars at lunchtime to middle-aged men, and when most people were paying back their loans to the finance houses. In International Plaza Wan Chai, my partner, Larry Snowden, was coming in later and later each day to go through the voicemail and post-it notes Virginia, our tall Chinese office girl and permanent frustration, had garnered the previous afternoon. Larry and I had a perfect relationship. We brought out the worst and the best in each other. Thrown out of the local police for devotion to drink, he had discovered cannabis and other substances instead. He spoke perfect Cantonese, had a devoted Filipino wife, and an extraordinary knowledge of Hong Kong's underbelly. He was both broader and shorter than myself. We looked like some seaside comedy act when in public. In private, we scowled at one another, each of us believing we had reached a new low. "Something for you," he said, and stuck the post-it on my glass top desk in the little alcove overlooking a large sign outside advertising traditional Thai massage. "Lost dog, annoying neighbour?" "No, sounds rather interesting. Moneyed address, if I'm not mistaken. Political connections. This could be the big break." "You don't say." I left the cramped, refrigerated splendour of Great Eagle Investigations 10 minutes later. The note said urgent, and I could call any morning before 1 p.m, the sooner the better. I took the mirror-clad lift down to the ground floor and stepped into the surprising freshness of October, that time of the year when the drenching humidity of Hong Kong backs off a little and fills up the airport and the bars and the shops with German commercial buyers and sensible tourists. Wan Chai almost sparkled in the sunlight, and I boarded a red minibus. Within 20 minutes I was standing in front of Chem China Commercial Mansions, a huge bulging monolith surging up towards the smoggy firmament of deepest North Point. It had been opened a few months previously with all the usual fanfares and with record rents for the area. I was dressed on this occasion in my chalk-striped three-piece suit with the unfashionably wide lapels, a newish Marks & Spencer button-down collar white shirt, and a sensible striped tie. My London brogues were shiny and tied neatly, and my still noticeably blonde hair was clipped, in control and reasonably washed. My partially bitten fingernails were at least clean, and my face was luminous, pink, and reasonably well rested. All in all, I was everything the professional private detective ought to be. I was calling on a lot of money. I'd rung the number on the post-it and had found out that I was visiting a member of the Legislative Council called Anson Chow. She belonged to something called the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment of Hong Kong. The party was aligned to all the mainland's views on Hong Kong and valued ideas like patriotism, consensus, and the status quo. I vaguely remembered seeing flabby, jowled Mrs. Chow on posters and in newspaper articles, mostly at rallies or press conferences, where she espoused thoughts well in keeping with her appearance. The security check in the vast black marble foyer was rigorous to the extent that I had to actually sign in and produce my identity card. Most foreigners are absolved the procedure. The security men were neat, trim young Nepalis in blue berets. They actually looked as if they could secure something. Most of the security guards in Hong Kong were old men with an awareness of mummies and did double shifts. The lift was considerably smoother and more capacious than at International Plaza, and for a moment I had a nostalgic reverie of chambers in the Lippo Centre, glorious days when money came in buckets, or at least generous bank transfers. Où sont les chèques d'autant? The lift opened slowly and smoothly, and I was on Mrs. Chow's floor, the 38th. The atmosphere was surprisingly subdued and businesslike. It could have been an insurance company or a solicitor's. The receptionist sat behind a high, short, curved desk made of lacquered pine. Behind her was a huge composite picture of Hong Kong on a smogless day, with various worthies of the DAB in heroic or jocular poses, meeting the folk, doing good works, or bantering with important personages. The slogan was in Chinese, and it looked like "Forward with the People" or some such mush. On a long blue upholstered bench there sat a collection of forlorn-looking locals, voters perhaps, who had come for a consultation, redress of some kind, of wrong, or simply a handout. I laid my card on a small plastic tray and said, "I'm expected. Please take a seat, Mr. Trelford." The receptionist was the sort of girl I would have gotten the hots for in the old days, not because she was particularly attractive, because she looked such a challenge. She was mousy, bespectacled at first glance, but under all that she had smooth skin, large eyes, and I thought all kinds of virginal hang-ups. She disappeared in several moments behind a large grey screen. There were a few murmurs and a conclusion reached. I was led down an anonymous-looking corridor to an equally anonymous-looking door. The girl, who I now saw had a more than acceptable lower body, tapped slightly on the door. I entered slowly and a little warily. The door closed behind me with a soft swoosh, but that might have been the girl's legs. The office was clearly calculated to impress and reassure at the same time. You could have got all of our office at International Plaza in it, and a couple of BMW parking spaces besides. The carpet was soft, but you didn't totally feel like you were wading in something. The hard wooden chairs dared you to sit in them. The light was subdued, but you had a feeling that it could be turned up at a moment's notice to help out a visiting film crew, grill a quisling, or examine a suitcase of hard currency. At the head of the room, by a subtly shaded bay window, sat Mrs. Anson Chow. Her desk looked like, from this distance, like a Korean chest turned on its side. I had only ever seen something similar in the office of a very old firm of Hong Kong solicitors, which specialized in mainland law. What little there was of it at that time. It was all brass and redwood, and seemed to say, "We're Oriental, don't you know it?" The Asiatic theme extended into the usual lugubrious pictures of flat Chinese landscapes, which might have been worth a fortune, or could have been bought at a junk shop to fit the length of the walls. I'm no judge of such things. The lines of books, on the other hand, looked comfortable and spoilt, as if they had never had to leave home. Whatever business went on in the office, books and their contents didn't come much into it, I was sure. "Ah, come closer, Mr. Trelford. Please take a seat." The voice was of a crinkle-faced and stiffly permed dragon of a woman who might have been 70 or only 69 and lying about it. She had installed herself in an orthopaedic-looking redwood chair, relieved by humane cushions at her back and padded armrests at the side. As I approached Mrs. Chow across the still slightly ankle-tickling carpet, I saw that she was everything I had suspected. A lot of money in the shape of jewellery and dress had been applied to very little result. She still looked one generation away from the farm. I sat down in a low chair which was stiff as a bailiff's smile and unadorned with cushions. It jolted me awake for some reason. Mrs. Chow proffered a card with a lot of titles under her name, a nice card, not too showy despite all the titles and with no gold lettering to be seen anywhere. I reached for my own, the one without the Tommy guns, which was rather tasteful if all you had to compete with was a firm of budget plumbers. Mrs. Chow scanned it with vague disdain. "I see you're a barrister, Mr. Telford." Resting, as they say in show business. She obviously knew why, but she wasn't letting on. "You're probably wondering why I should choose a foreign firm to handle my little problem." It had crossed my mind. "Well, I assume you have people in the office who can speak Chinese. That isn't an issue, I think. We do, however, need someone of a certain delicacy and calibre. Moreover, the person involved, the focus of your inquiries, is not what you could call a local person in any real sense. She's my daughter." While I was taking all that in, she stood up, leant across the desk, and was just about able to place a piece of paper and a glossy photograph in front of me without throwing it. The face on the photograph looked more than appealing. It was the kind of face you saw in the Hong Kong Tatler, hugging a glass of orange juice with a napkin around it, looking gorgeous in an embarrassed and demure kind of way. The way sweet and lovely 20-something Hong Kong girls sometimes do, even when they have a lot of money behind them. The note attached to it was a fragment of an email dated 2 days previously. The email address had been neatly obliterated. "Dear Mummy, please don't try and find me. I really think it's best I left Hong Kong for a while and thought about what I am going to do the rest of my life. I'm quite safe. I'll be in touch again soon. You don't have to worry." I left the Lancia with Mr. Sung in Stanley. He has the keys anyway, but I don't know where he's parked it. I don't want to cause him more expense, so can you pick it up for me and hold it in your garage until I come back? Love, Adeline. Nice English, fluent. She was educated abroad, England mainly. She's hardly Chinese at all. So why do you think she's suddenly run off like this? I have no idea. She's always been an emotional girl, but steady deep down. Her behaviour is quite out of character. Our case files were full of the same type, but I said nothing. So what do you want me to do exactly, Mrs. Chow? I want you to find her, Mr. Telford, and tell her to come back to Hong Kong. She's been working as a political research officer in the Southern District for some time, and she used the premises of Mr. Sung's Kai Fung Family Advancement Association for that purpose. Well, it might help to have the whole email plus the email address. I'm afraid I can't give you those at present. The rest of the email is rather personal. If you wish to communicate with her, I'd like to see the draft of your mail first. I suddenly felt the urge to smoke, but remembered that I had given up long ago. It seemed long ago, at any rate. Why would that be exactly, Mrs. Chow? She let that go and fiddled with a file on her desk for a moment. I went on. Did she live with you? Yes, of course. Any particularly close boyfriends? None that I knew of. She is, of course, a most popular girl, and probably under 24-hour surveillance, I thought. Could you possibly tell me if what she said in the rest of the email gives you any clue as to why she's run off? Mrs. Chow's bespectacled eyes darted a moment about the room, searching for inspiration, and finding none. That has no bearing on the case. I tried another tack. If a pretty young girl like this suddenly gets it in her head to run away, where does your motherly instinct tell you she would go? She could be anywhere. She has her own resources, credit cards and allowance. Why didn't she take the car? I'm afraid I have no idea. I could see I wasn't getting anywhere fast. You will tell me, Mrs. Chow, if you hear from her in any way. People run off for all sorts of reasons, and they usually turn up again. But now and again, they don't. Have you contacted the police? Why should I have? Well, they would be able to tell us right away if she had crossed the border, gone to China, or taken a ferry or plane somewhere. I couldn't possibly do that. As I said, Mr. Telford, this is a delicate family matter, and has to be handled with some caution. I've made out a cheque for $20,000 to cover your initial time and expenses. Let me know immediately when and if you find her. So there I was again, like most of the gumshoes and Seamuses throughout history, with half a cockeyed story from a clammed-up client, caught between a wild goose chase and dangling my feet at the office for yet another sad and sorry week. I took the case.